What causes me to lose sleep at night is the prospect that Trump will say, we need to take a look at what's happening in all the population centers in these swing states, in Atlanta and Philadelphia and Milwaukee and Detroit. And I think that there were late night vote dumps, and all of these votes have to be cast out. And instead of having somebody like Bill Barr who's going to call it bullshit, rightfully so, you've got these other people who are going to say, you know what? We think there were fraudulent votes, and so we have to get in there and seize the voting machines.
I'm Joanna. I'm the Chief Content Officer of The Daily Beast, and this is The Daily Beast podcast. I hope you're walking your dog or doing something very useful while you're listening to this. But if you're watching it on YouTube or on your television, you're going to see someone that I am obsessed with, Brian Tyler Cohen. He speaks with an extraordinary fluency and an urgency, and that has earned him 4.5 million followers on his YouTube channel, where he chronicles the news with a myopic precision. Anyway, I've long been an admirer, and I'm very pleased to spend the next half hour talking to him about what he thinks about what the legacy of the Republican Party may be, and also what the Democrats should be doing to take it on. Couldn't be more excited to talk to Brian Tyler Cohen. Why is that such a mouthful, your name? I do not know. But I am astonished at your output. You are like a one-man broadcasting machine. Just reassure me, how many people do you have writing for you at this point, Brian?
So writing for me is just me. I write everything that I put out.
Everything you put out, because sometimes you do up to 7 podcasts a day.
Yeah, it's amazing what you can do when you're willing to sacrifice all of your mental health and meaningful relationships.
I don't believe that for a minute. I think your mental health is probably very good because you've got so much. You're clearly enjoying yourself so much.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do what I do. I will say that it has gotten tougher to compartmentalize over the years. I mean, I've been doing this since Trump came on the scene, and it used to be a lot easier to put my work aside and then to get back into my normal life. And, it chips away over the course of years and years and years. But now it's more of I have to make a concerted effort to make sure I preserve some sense of sanity, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
All right, well, let's come on to your lifestyle in a moment. But you say you started when Trump did. You've got 4.5 million subscribers. You have a massive impact. You have a whole group of followers. What I really respond to when I hear you is your apparent authenticity, and also your sort of anger and your perception about what's going on. And in particular, and if for those watching this or listening to this who don't know your work, I really recommend your pieces after Donald Trump sends in the National Guard to LA. I really recommend they look at your analysis of the great military parade. Just 2 recent pieces that I just thought were absolutely terrific. What makes you the most sort of angry?
I think there are a few things. One is a little bit inside baseball, and that is the inability of the people who are in positions of power to meet the urgency of the moment. And I think that's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. And again, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to do this. I wish I wasn't in a position where it was necessary. I wish that the people who hid behind slogans like democracy dies in darkness were able to meet the urgency of this moment and to recognize that, okay, if democracy is going to die in darkness, then it's your responsibility. It's everybody in the media's responsibility to actually call out what's happening. And so often I feel like we continuously use, and that is like everybody in the media will use the same playbooks that we've used in decades past and try to transpose them onto this moment, and we can't, because we're in a different moment, and it requires fighting in a different way than we have fought before. And the Republicans get that. They get how to adapt to this moment, how to adapt to the Trumpism of it all, and how to fight with everything they've got, because they know that their goal at the end of this is to consolidate power for themselves. The left and the media doesn't seem to get it. We seem to be stuck in this idea that we can like usher in some bygone era of bipartisanship or compromise, and we're just not there anymore. And that's not just us failing to meet the moment, but it's actually giving a green light to the worst actors in government to know that we're just not able to do what needs to be done to confront them. And man, if I was them, I would feel so, I would feel so, I would feel like I have such a clear runway to just do whatever I want, knowing that my opponents are just so unwilling to kind of meet this moment with the urgency that it deserves.
Well, you've used the word urgency, and that's what I love that you bring to your recordings in particular. And also, you've said repeatedly that you think that the Democrats are just ignoring the digital moment, that they don't know how to lean into the digital moment. You clearly do. As I said, you've got 4.5 million subscribers. Let's step back a bit. How did you get into this in the first place? Because you literally are like your own one-man broadcasting channel. So you say you feel very lucky to have this opportunity to do it, but you created your own opportunity.
Yeah, I was on Facebook back in early days of the Trump administration, and I thought that would be a great way to be able to reach as many people as I could. And this was before there was, you didn't go to Facebook really to get your news, but more and more people were coming on to Facebook. And that was my first foray into digital media online. And I started to notice as I was on Facebook that as it related to video content, there was no left-wing video content. I was only being served right-wing content. And I live in Los Angeles. I had moved here initially to work in the entertainment industry. Ironically enough, my first job was at Fox. It was Fox Broadcasting Company, but I worked in the drama and comedy departments for TV, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to work in the industry, and so I was in development, and when I was there, we developed shows like Bob's Burgers, for example.
You developed Bob's Burgers?
No.
Well, you were on that team.
I was at Fox when they had developed that show. I was an assistant to the comedy and drama managers, so all the credit goes to them.
And this was after you'd left Lehigh University?
This was after I left Lehigh, yeah. So I came out here to LA, and so I wanted to be in the industry, and all of my friends out here were actors, and so I started getting the acting bug, and did some stuff in front of the camera. But even as I was waiting in the audition rooms to do like a Doritos commercial or whatever it was, it felt so unfulfilling. And I would be on my phone, I'd be looking at what's happening in the news, and then you'd go into this whole separate world where I'm like, how does nobody know what's happening around us? Like we have crazy stuff happening in DC, and like now I'm in an audition for ice
Doritos,
cream, for Doritos, like whatever it may be. And there came a point where I remember my last audition, I called my agent as I was on my way out, and I was like, I just cannot do this anymore. And she was like, I had a feeling that was coming. But, I had some experience in front of the camera, so I figured if I'm only getting served right-wing content, I'm just going to start making this content on my own and putting it out there and see how it does. And I just kind of, for years and years, kept my head down, posted consistently every single day. And, it was actually the perfect move for me at that time, because working in the entertainment industry, you have to wait on hundreds of people to give you permission to be able to do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. I had to find representation, somebody who wanted to represent me. Then they had to submit me to casting directors who wanted to see me. And then if the casting director liked me, you have to make sure that the producers and the directors liked you. And then you have to get, approval from studios, approval from the rest of their teams, from other producers. And then I've been on jobs where then you get cut from the final product. And so it's just a lot of people there that are in a position to tell you no. And now I'm in a position where I work for myself. And so if there's something that I want to say, if there's something that I want to do, I'm able to do it with full autonomy. And so it was a great change of pace from an industry where probably more than any other industry, you were just waiting for permission from a lot of people who are just lined up to be able to tell you can't do it.
Right. So you took back control. You started your own thing. How did you lean into politics, and how did you decide what issues you were going to embrace first?
Yeah, I've always been obsessed with politics. When I was at Lehigh back in 2008, I organized buses to bring all of the students from campus to their polling places. And then, I'm part of the same class of Americans who got especially involved in politics when Trump was elected in 2016, took office in 2017. And it became all I could think about. And I had other jobs in the meantime, but it was hard to do a normal job and just kind of recognize the insanity of everything that was happening around me. in terms of what I wanted to focus on specifically, I'm especially focused on, I really love like litigation. I love like the issue of voting rights. I have a series that I do with Glenn Kirshner and Mark Elias, both of whom are at the top of their fields. So just learning about the law, and more importantly, being able to teach people about the law, is really where my passion is. And look, I hope we get to a point where, instead of focusing on the legal issues, because we're so immersed in this stuff, and instead of focusing on all of the affronts to democracy, we can get to a point where then I can talk about, here's what we can accomplish. Here's what we can do as far as protecting the planet from climate change is concerned. Here's what it looks like to move into, deep into the 21st century with a fully renewable energy sector. And that's the stuff I hope we get to, instead of being able to become an expert at legal things, because we're just watching Trump defy court orders. And so what does that mean? What does it mean to go from the trial court to the appeals court to en banc review to the Supreme Court? Like, again, all of this is kind of a testament to the fact that we have to learn this stuff. But I hope there comes a point where we can pivot to, okay, here's how to hold bad actors accountable, to here's what we can actually accomplish once we do have control of government.
So you've been in the entertainment business before you started essentially your own broadcasting channel. What do you think of Trump as, what do you think of the president, I should say, really? It sounds somehow so disrespectful to the office just to refer to him by his last name. But what do you think of what he has brought to the presidency in terms of celebrity and energy? I really take your point about the Democrats not having fully embraced the potential of digital. What do you think he's brought to it? Because you can't deny that he's a very successful television programmer in the way that he thinks of his presidency.
100%. I think that, and this is to my own dismay, but I think he has allowed culture to shift from the Democrats to the Republicans. When I was coming of age in politics, Obama was the president, and Obama was cool. Like, there's no way around it. You can't look at Obama, especially when, he's running against, like, John McCain, he was running against Mitt Romney. These guys weren't cool. And Obama would play basketball. He was young and charismatic and energetic and good looking, and so it became a thing where the notion when I was in college of anybody being like, I'm a Republican, was just so outlandish. And now I think that by virtue of the fact that, well, Democrats have a lot of responsibility here too, in that we are very bad on the left at making way for the next generation. And so, the same people who might have been cool 20 years ago, well, they're still in office. And so it's a lot harder to relate to people when you've had the same representatives, the same senators for decades and decades and decades and decades. Inherently, you're going to have less and less of an ability to be able to relate to newer generations who are coming onto the scene. And so our inability to kind of make way for the next generation, plus the Republicans' embrace of independent media, while the Democrats were focusing on, MSNBC and CNN and the New York Times, all of which play an important role in our media, the Republicans weren't getting what they needed from liberal media. And so they created their own outlets. But the difference is that those outlets are not objective news sources. These are, Fox News and OAN and Newsmax and the Daily Wire and Alex Jones's show. And so these are avowed Republicans. And so that created this asymmetry in the media where Democrats continue to rely on legacy media, which again is important, but these are not on Team Blue. And then you've got these right-wing outlets which are on Team Red. And so that asymmetry was just so staggering. And it took so long. It took until, December of 2024 for us to even recognize that there was a problem in the vast majority of this party. And so now we're sprinting from behind to try and create parity, but at least there's a recognition that the problem exists, and so now it's a matter of whether we're going to be able to have the tools to fight back, and build up our presence where people actually are getting their news.
So going back a bit, you talk about Obama being cool, and actually Obama is an interesting politician because he sort of defied the normal time that you're expected to serve. He came in after 2 years in the Senate, and then he spun out, right? He's not still around. I mean, it's one of the arguments that lots of Democrats have with him, or one of the beefs they have with him, I should say, that he's not very visible right now. But And you make the very good point that John McCain and Mitt Romney, who ran against Obama, weren't cool. Donald Trump arguably wasn't cool either. I mean, he was a bit of a joke when he started. Nobody thought he would get through. What is it about him, do you think, that has been so unassailable?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. One, he talks like a normal person, and I think that in an era where language on the left has become increasingly politically correct, Donald Trump served as the antidote to that. He also understands that we're in an era where if you mess up, which Donald Trump does on a daily basis, that the only way to get past that is to come out guns ablazing the next day and the next day and the next day and just kind of offer up a barrage of where even if you've screwed up royally on Monday, you've said so many things Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that there is not a shot in the dark that anyone will be able to continue talking about what's happened on Monday because you've given them so much more. Correct. And the Democrats don't understand that if you make a mistake, if you say something that's 1 inch left of center and you're getting criticism for that, they will retreat and figure out, like, go into pull a committee together and figure out how to craft the perfect response. And they give you no more information. They don't put anything else out into the zeitgeist. And so inherently, the only thing to focus on is that mess up. And Trump is 10 steps ahead. He's already, yes, granted, he's screwed up 10 times in the meantime, but you can't talk about the first 9 because you can only focus on the last one. And this is a deliberate strategy. It's what Steve Bannon calls flooding the zone with shit, and he understands that. But Democrats are often so safe, so unoffensive. We make sure that all of our messages are poll tested. If news breaks, then we have to wait 3 days before we figure out what we can say and who we can say it to and what language would be perfect. And that news cycle has moved on. And I think his understanding of how quickly the media moves these days has helped him figure out how to kind of manipulate it. And you're right, he's not particularly cool, but I think when contrasted with the Democrats and how slow and safe and unoffensive they've become, well, if it's between A and B and he's moving 10 steps faster than the Democrats, then it's not really much of a question on who's going to win.
So did you know when Kamala Harris was in the middle of her election campaign, which admittedly was incredibly short, 103 days, I think it was, did you sense that she was going to lose? No, I didn't. And admittedly, like I'm not who you want to go to the racetrack to bet on things. I mean, people thought she was going to win because it seemed unthinkable that Donald Trump would get back in power. Yeah, it's true. No, I thought that she would win. I thought the energy that she was able to harness in just 3 months was really impressive given the time constraints on her campaign. But I think the reality is, and this comes with experience too, but the reality is that there were a few things that were holding Democrats back, and one was the economic environment. Not just in the United States, but across the world. When you have a high inflation environment, and even people who are not paying attention to politics recognize what's happening because they feel it, and they're going to blame the people in charge. And the people in charge were the Democrats, and so it's as simple as that. In that respect, I don't know who you could have chosen. I don't know that it's necessarily even a matter of Kamala being the nominee. I think anybody with a D next to their name, in an environment where Americans were looking to punish the Ds, those people would have failed. And the second thing is that, again, lending itself to what we were speaking about earlier, is that Republicans just dominated the media ecosystem where people are getting their news. And Kamala, God knows how much money went to the Sphere in Vegas, or I'm sure plenty of funds were wasted. But the reality is that where the Republicans spent their money was where people actually were. It was on these digital platforms. It was on vertical content platforms, and I think the silver lining of this is that Democrats recognized where we have to start investing some resources. The flip side of that is that it came at the cost of allowing Donald Trump back into office. So I want to come back to the Democrats and who you think are really the potential leaders for the future in a moment. But first, let's just talk about Donald Trump, because who do you think are the most dangerous people in his cabinet? How much time you got? I mean, the problem is his cabinet, they all share the same quality, which is that they are there to serve as a rubber stamp
on him. There are no bulwarks against the worst excesses of Trump. And so you have somebody like Pete Hegseth, who is eminently unqualified. I mean, this is a weekend Fox anchor who's running the military right now. And even in the moment that we're in, as we're recording this, which is that we don't know whether the attack on Iran's nuclear facilities were successful. Well, the intelligence committee says that they weren't entirely successful, but you have Trump, trying to save face for himself, saying that they were. And of course, Pete Hegseth hears the clarion call, and he just parrots exactly what Trump says. And so what good does that do to have somebody in office who is, not there to serve as anything other than just someone who's going to regurgitate what Trump says? But then even more insidious than that is the folks, I think, in the law enforcement agencies, and that is Dan Bongino, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi, because we've seen the ways in which Trump has an eagerness to pervert what's happening in the law to help himself politically and electorally. And so we saw in the last election when Trump tried to say that there was massive fraud in the cities, that there was fraud in Detroit and Milwaukee and Philadelphia, and even Bill Barr, who is not some crunchy liberal, right? This isn't a guy that's like marching down the street alongside BLM protesters. This is a pretty damn conservative Republican. Even he came out and said that what Trump is saying is bullshit. And so thank God they weren't able to basically exploit our law enforcement agencies to lend itself to Trump's fever dreams. But now we're in a situation where Kash Patel and Dan Bongino are perfectly content to do that. Pam Bondi is perfectly content to do that. And so what causes me to lose sleep at night is the prospect that Trump will say, we need to take a look at what's happening in all the population centers in these swing states, in Atlanta and Philadelphia and Milwaukee and Detroit. And I think that there were late night vote dumps, and all of these votes have to be cast out. And instead of having somebody like Bill Barr who's going to call it bullshit, rightfully so, you've got these other people who are going to say, you know what? We think there were fraudulent votes, and so we have to get in there and seize the voting machines. And now we're also in a situation where there are troops right here in Los Angeles. And if he exports that strategy to other states, well, then there are boots on the ground, literal boots on the ground, to be able to go in and effectuate his plans. And so, not to bring the conversation down, but that is the stuff that scares me about putting these complete groveling, slavishly sycophantic Trump devotees in these positions of power in the law enforcement agencies.
So one of the other people that you've also been covering with real meticulousness is Robert Kennedy Jr. Do you want to add him to your list?
Yeah, that's in a little bit of a different category. So again, like what I'm especially passionate about is like a defense of democracy, right? Robert F. Kennedy poses separate dangers that I think are just as. I mean, I'm the son of two healthcare workers, and so I have seen the ways in which A, the healthcare system doesn't work, but B, how it could be undermined by bad actors like him. And I had the opportunity to interview him before the election, and I don't know how it actually happened because
you probably thought you were working for someone else.
I presume so, but had the opportunity to speak with him, and look, I think that he has a law degree. He has no degree in medicine or public health, and especially it is outside the realm of reason and logic that we would have somebody at this moment in time, in the immediate aftermath of a pandemic, who has no backgrounds, no bona fides in any public health or medicine, that he would be there to lead the nation's healthcare agencies. I mean, to be the guy who has oversight over the CDC and the NIH and Medicare and Medicaid. But that's the moment we're in right now, and so it's just one more thing that's at risk, not just at the hands of RFK, but also, I mean, all of these Republicans who are looking to strip healthcare away from Americans, kind of in defiance of history, because we watched what happened when Republicans went after the ACA in 2017, and they lost the House in 2018 by the biggest margin in modern American history. They're kind of repeating the same strategy now, but kind of weirdly, I actually, from a raw political perspective, I understand what they're doing, and it's almost impressive because they know what they want. And that is they want to give themselves tax cuts and they want to consolidate power for themselves. And, they have a tax cut on the table right now, and they want this tax cut to be permanent. And they know what happens when you go after healthcare, but they need some way to offset these tax cuts for themselves. And so they're going to do it. And they also understand that they may lose in midterms, but that it's temporary, and that when they are given the opportunity to get into power, they will exercise that power to the nth degree, even if it means that it's to their own electoral detriment. And they may very well lose in midterms, but they'll come back. I mean, they incited an insurrection against the U.S. government in 2020, and it's 2025, and they have full control of government right now. They know that Americans have short attention spans and short memories. But what they do with power is they figure out exactly what they want. And unlike the Democrats, who often feel like they figure out any way not to accomplish what they want to do, the Republicans say, even if it means it's to our own electoral detriment, we will get what we want. We will give ourselves a tax cut. And yes, we may lose the election after that, but guess what? Our wallets are going to be fatter and we're going to be happier.
All right. So who are the Democrats going to put forward who can take this crew on? Who would you put money on? If you're a betting person, and you may be a betting person, who would you put money on? Top three.
I would say that we're going to be in a situation, we may very well be in a situation like Barack Obama, where in 2000, let's see, this would be the equivalent of like 2005. I don't think anybody knew who Barack Obama was outside of Illinois.
Barack Obama had a keynote at the previous convention 4 years before he actually ran. So people say, he was complete unknown. He wasn't a total unknown.
It wasn't a total unknown, but unless you're a political junkie who's watching political conventions, especially in an era where not that many people were tuning into politics like they are today, generally people didn't know who Barack Obama was. But I think very likely we may be in a situation like that. But to give you a straight answer, if I had to guess from the crop of people that we're looking at right now, three names that probably jump to mind, and there are two names that I think are owed to the fact that these folks know how to get into uncomfortable spaces, and that is Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg. And we've seen instances where they're both going on Fox News, they're both going on these right-wing podcasts, and I do think it's important that we get into spaces that are uncomfortable, because Democrats lost the popular vote, they lost the electoral vote. We are not in a position where we can just stay within the confines of our own base. Inherently, we have to be able to reach people outside of our tent. One other name that I think is interesting is Wes Moore. And he is a young, charismatic governor in Maryland. He's largely unknown. So I think that's actually a benefit for him because yes, Gavin Newsom has built up kind of a brand for himself as a fighter. Yes, Pete Buttigieg is probably the best spoken politician that we have, but both of them have baggage. I mean, Gavin Newsom is a punching bag for Republicans from this big blue liberal bastion of California, and so Republicans are very good at making Democrats into boogeymen, and they did it with Hillary Clinton for the better part of a couple of decades. Now they're doing it with Gavin Newsom, and of course Pete Buttigieg was in the Biden administration, and there's baggage that comes with that. Wes Moore benefits from the fact that he's largely unknown. But that's at, in this snapshot in time, and things can change over the course of days or weeks in politics today. So, but I would say, in late June of 2025, some folks that I'm looking at right now that I think are probably ahead of the pack are going to be Newsom, Buttigieg, and Wes Moore.
You mentioned Wes Moore, Pete Buttigieg, and Gavin Newsom as potential leaders. What about AOC, who is pretty competent when it comes to handling digital?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think she is in large part the future of the Democratic Party. I think we should be elevating her every chance we get. I don't know that she's in the running for, I feel like it would be impossible to look at Gavin Newsom and not recognize that he's running for president. And the fact that Pete Buttigieg skipped out on running for the U.S. Senate in Michigan also lends itself to this idea that he's probably running for president. I don't know that we've gotten any indication from AOC that she's going to throw her hat in the ring. And she's also been very deliberate about the steps that she takes. I feel like is not just throwing herself at every opportunity, that she's very strategic about the way that she advances up the chain. But look, I think that and I'm proud to say that I think she's the future of the Democratic Party. She is passionate. She's progressive. She she deeply believes in what she says and what she stands for. She's probably one of the best speakers that we have in the party. She's able to capture attention, and going back to what we were speaking about with Obama, she's cool. Like, she's charismatic. People are drawn to her. They want to hear what she has to say, and just being able to garner attention in this media environment is half the battle. I think Trump has benefited from it so much. And if somebody as reprehensible as him is able to garner all of this attention because he knows how to operate in this media ecosystem, imagine somebody like AOC who has virtuous ideas behind her, who isn't out there trying to rip people out of their communities because of the color of their skin, who isn't out there trying to strip healthcare away from people, who isn't out there trying to take food assistance away from the most vulnerable among us, who isn't out there denying the impacts of climate change, even as insurance companies are pulling out of places like Florida and California. So if you have a competent speaker and you mix that with virtuous ideas, I think that's a recipe for success. So I have no doubt about the extent to which she's going to ascend on the left.
Let me ask you then, just before we wrap up, what do you think the chances are that we get through to 2028 with democracy still intact? I mean, I really appreciate the way you focus on what the Justice Department is doing, and clearly the Democrats are using the courts as a form of resistance as the Trump government oversteps the mark. I guess what I'm asking is, do you think the courts will hold, and do you think we get through to 2028 with the possibility of a fair election?
It's a really good question. I do think it could go either way. I mean, my honest opinion is if we have Democrats who are willing to fight with everything they've got and not kind of defer to this bygone era of, our friends on the other side of the aisle, if we have people who are truly looking to exercise the full strength of the party, the courts, the law, whatever we have at our disposal, then I think there is a world in which we can stave off what I believe is an inevitable onslaught by Republicans. I don't think that Donald Trump is firing career civil servants and replacing them with political loyalists because he has, a focus on the next 3.5 years. I think that the Stephen Millers of the world and the Russ Votes of the world, the folks who are operating in the background, have every single intention of entrenching Republican power for the foreseeable future, like indefinitely. So it could, in my opinion, it could go, and I understand that this is not really a satisfying answer, but I do believe that it could go either way, because if the Democrats don't have their wits about them, and the Democrats are going to maybe defer to the processes of the bygone era and focus on norms and kind of show some of the weakness that has been roundly criticized in the past, then I think Republicans will be successful at undermining our democracy. And I don't know that we'll be in a position where we'll be able to fight back in 26 and 28. The flip side is if we do have people who are looking to leave it all on the field and fight with everything they've got, folks like Mark Elias, who are, on the front lines every day, understanding the urgency of this moment that we're in, then I think that we'll be in a position where we can fight back. But look, it could go either way right now, and it just relies on having people who understand this moment and are willing to actually fight with the same strength that Republicans are fighting right now.
Has the Democratic Party reached out to you, or have any candidates reached out to you to get your help as they navigate the next few years?
No, but I don't think that. I mean, I've spoken with Democrats about how to optimize on digital media platforms, and I've helped. I've spoken with a lot of elected officials in terms of doing that. But in terms of the messaging, no. I mean, I'm not consulting with any Democrats, but I think that what I've been able to do is just kind of lead by example, and I've been focusing relentlessly on fighting back and elevating fighters, and that's something that I talk about almost every day, certainly something that I pose to all of the elected officials that I speak with, and oftentimes I'll only speak with elected officials who are getting out there, figuring out how to break through and figuring out how to fight. And so I think just by doing that kind of offers some incentive structure for the people who are in office to know, okay, if I want to get attention, at least just from this one channel, and there are lots of us in the pro-democracy ecosystem, and I'm glad to be surrounded by a growing ecosystem here of folks who are fighting back against what's happening. But, all I can do in my little corner of the internet is try and elevate people who are actually fighting, who are actually meeting with this moment with the urgency that it deserves. And I think that that's catching on. And so insofar as I can be helpful on that front and say, like, hey, the way to get some attention, the way to get an interview, the way to get some coverage is to do something that shows that you're willing to fight. If I can do that, then I feel like that's me doing my job.
Well, you certainly seem to be very successful in doing your job. Your urgency comes through the I don't know what the word is, prolificity, I want to say, but I don't think that's a word. The prolific nature of what you do is deeply impressive, especially as to someone who's putting out 3 podcasts a week, and that's enough. So thank you very much. And I would love to have you back, especially at moments. It feels like every week there are new moments. And I was particularly struck, as I said, by your analysis of the parade. But then, of course, we've moved on. Nobody remembers the parade anymore. No one remembers Elon Musk. No one remembers the tariffs, because we're deep in the Iran moment at the moment. Yeah. But huge thanks for coming on. We really appreciate you taking a break from your schedule.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
They do say never meet your heroes, but I will say that Brian has become a hero of mine, and I am very curious to meet him in real life, but I loved meeting him on Digital Life. I think he's a really extraordinary talent, and I hope that we can become reverse mentors, though I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to mentor him on, but I would like all sorts of tips from him on how to broadcast effectively on YouTube. Anyway, that does mean I must ask you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel. And for up to the date, up for the minute information, you must go on thedailybeast.com and subscribe to The Daily Beast. We are independent media, and our aim is to over-report and under-comment in our stories. So if you have been, thank you for listening. And don't forget to be beast. And share this podcast with anybody you know and lots of people you don't know, because why wouldn't you? What else have you got to do? Be frank. Anyway, this podcast was produced by Devin Rogerino, Anna von Ursen, and it was edited by Jesse Millward.